I will now call the Community Safety Committee meeting to order at 6:34 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This meeting is being held in person and electronically in accordance with the Municipal Act. There's no public meetings, open delegations, or presentations, or standing items or referred items today, but we do have reports of the advisory committees. There's 2 of them to be received. 6.1, report of the Seniors and Accessibility Advisory Committee dated October 16th, 2023, and report of the Town and Gown Committee dated October 17th, 2023. Can I have a member of the committee place the advisory reports on the floor to be received?
Put them on the floor.
On the floor by Deputy Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councilor Corser. Any questions for members of committee or members in attendance? No, seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate. Passes unanimously, thank you. And finally, there's one recommendation from the Seniors and Accessibility Advisory Committee report dated October 16th, 2023 for the committee's consideration. Investigation of a design and reconstruction of the main parking lot in Painswick Park. That staff in the Development Services Department be directed to investigate the feasibility of designing and reconstructing the main parking lot in Painswick Park to a fully accessible asphalt parking lot, and that the project be considered in the 10-year capital budget for completion in 2024, subject to available funding. Does a member of committee wish to put the motion on the floor?
I'll put the motion on the floor, but I have questions.
Yeah. Put on the floor by Mayor Nettle. The floor is yours.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to to Bala. With regards to the 2024 budget, is there extra funds available that have been outlined for this project? Like, we're 2 weeks before budget right now.
Through you, Chair Morales, to Mayor Noble. At this time, there are no funds in the draft 2024 budget for this. So we would need new funds.
Okay. And I guess I'd probably move an amendment that removed 2024, but had staff investigate in the 10-year plan. And my thought process is this, is that number one, first of all, the most popular park in the city, the most used park in the city. I can testify to that because I take my kids there and it's hard to find parking sometimes. But I don't know why we would move it to the front of the line ahead of everything else. There is a tarmac parking lot there up top. It's gravel down below. And if there's a study that's being done around the city that says this is the most important one to do, I'm totally for that, but it doesn't sound like there has been. I think it's been an incredible investment in Ward 9. We've got private sector money in there from Canadian Tire. We've spent a whole bunch of money ourselves, but I just don't understand why this jumps the queue for other paving projects around the city. So I guess I'll leave my comments there. I think it needs to be done and needs to be done in the concept of the entire capital plan.
Thank you, Mayor Nettle. Councilor Corser.
Through you, Chair Morales, to, I guess, Bala. Is there any opportunity where there is the paved asphalt area, because it is a highly accessible park? Is there any opportunity to create maybe a temporary drop-off zone that so parents who, or caregivers who are looking after children with physical challenges can have that space so they can drop off their kids, then park if there's an issue with the unpaved area of the park? Is there something that can be done around that might be able to hold off having it repaved at this time? If that makes sense. Thank you.
Through you, Chair Morales, to Councilor Corser. So there is a paved parking lot there. And that area certainly can be used to drop off. And there's also parking with accessible features. I think this was intended as a second parking lot or to supplement additional parking for the facility there.
If I could just follow up. So if there is problems with overflow and the parking lot being very, very busy, I just would be concerned that maybe parents would might have to leave if they're not able to get that stop off point in space that they can drop off their kids and have them access the park, and then they can go park in the non-paved area. That's like a kind of like a drop-off zone, or that I'm not sure if there's something there in the park. It's just an idea that I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corser. Councillor Hamilton, who is online.
Hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Sorry, just gonna pipe in here because it is, I know it's Ward 9, but sorry, through you, Chair Morales, it's in Ward 9, but on close border to Ward 10. So I've also, as Mayor Nettle had with his kids, frequented this park quite a bit. And actually my Ward 10 Advisory Council has also brought to my attention a number of concerns by individuals with actual accessibility needs. So we've got, you know, a multi-million-dollar park that's put in there. It is fabulous. I agree. It is probably the most popular park in the city. And it's fabulous from an accessibility standpoint. And I know that there's an upper parking lot that is paved, but that lower parking lot is gravel, and it creates huge challenges from an accessibility standpoint. So those coming by sidewalk have to cross the gravel. If you park in that lower park, then lower lot to get up to the park, you're having to go through the gravel. So I have been there before when you have wheelchair accessible vans coming, and we've got people from outside of the city, within the city. It is hugely problematic. And in the winter, it's even worse, that lower parking lot. So I understand the pushback a little bit, Mayor Nettle, in terms of queue jumping. I don't particularly like that notion of queue jumping, but I also don't particularly like the fact that we have an accessible park, yet it's not actually accessible from a parking and walkway towards the park standpoint. So that's why I think this has come forward. There's been a number of residents that have brought this up, and it was unfortunate because I think this was such a good news story for the investment that has gone into this park. And I do think not completing this parking lot alongside it was a bit of an oversight. I have someone on my Ward 10 Advisory Council that has accessibility challenges. And she actually met with the community that they have there to get their feedback and get their input. And they all said collectively, this is a significant barrier for folks with accessibility challenges. So that's why I do think it's a bit more of a priority, not like I want to see queue jumping, but it's unfortunate again that we have this asset in our community that I think is just, we missed the mark with it from a parking standpoint.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Mayor Nettle.
So is there no accessible path from the sidewalk down to the park?
Through you, Chair Morales, to Councillor Nuttall, I think there is, but can I confirm that?
Yeah, I thought there was.
There was, yeah.
Yeah, I thought there was directly from the sidewalk to the park, but I could definitely be told I'm wrong.
You have to go through the gravel parking lot, and if you park in the gravel parking lot, obviously you have to cross the gravel parking lot onto a pathway that then leads into the park.
So yeah, I guess that was my question, Bryn, is there, so there's no way to get from the sidewalk around the park to the park?
No, if you're coming on, say, Big Bay along the sidewalk there, you have to cross over the gravel to get into the park.
Okay, so
Unless maybe you go through the school and around, I'd actually have to go navigate that, but I know directly from the sidewalk, you do have to cross the gravel parking lot.
and there's no path down from Big Bay Point to, correct? There's no path down from Big Bay Point to the park? No. So the only path is along Ashford itself? Okay, well, there actually is a path.
But it's
And
gravel.
so I think
Is that, so that path is gravel from Big Bay Point?
From Big Bay.
Yeah, I think it, unless it's been changed, it looks. It looks asphalt. This is pre-construction.
Yeah, one of the reasons I pulled it up and I'm like, I don't know, Google Maps doesn't help with the reconstruction.
Well, I understand from the parking lot, Deputy Mayor Thompson, I think the point is taken. If there's, if the people who need accessibility can't access the accessible park, that's ridiculous, right? You should be able to take a pedestrian type mode of transportation to get to an accessible park. If the question is walking up the Big Bay Point sidewalk to tarmac to come down to the park, then to me, that's an accessible access. If it's tarmac up there, then it's already there. If it's not, then it's not. We need to do something about it immediately.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mayor Nettle. I'll jump in quickly and then I'm gonna jump in just quickly, Councillor Harris, just because it's my word there. I want to add a little color and we can keep discussion going. Mayor Nettle, I agree with you about the queue jumping, and I know you're aware. Ward 9 has been very fortunate in the last couple of years, this year, with lots of capital investments. So I'm very cognizant of that. And I actually was initially against this when residents first kind of reached out to me and Councillor Hamilton. I want to thank Councillor Hamilton for helping me see the perspective. And I'm just going to echo what she said. It's an accessible park that doesn't have accessibility for, I would say, 60% of the parking. Unfortunately, because the park's so popular, the most prevalent occupier of the asphalt parking are pickleball players, which is not an issue. There's no rule. They're not breaking any rules, but unless we establish something that like pickleball players, thou shalt not go on the asphalt and leave it too accessible, we're going to have some issues there. And I agree that it was an oversight. We also have an accessible park that doesn't have accessible bathrooms. It has porta potties. That's a different discussion for another day. But in terms of the parking, few issues have I heard from Ward 9 residents so resoundingly than this one. And I have heard from a lot of Ward 10 residents, which is why Councillor Hamilton and I are kind of doing this one a little bit together. A lot of the kids, technically the school's in Ward 9, but a lot of its populace comes from the Ward 10 area. So I echo the concerns there. I also know that we leaned on Deputy Mayor Thompson just for kind of knowing what the gravel is, how much it's settled. Obviously, Deputy Mayor Thompson has experience and we kind of checked out the site and we've met with staff. So I'm pleasantly not surprised. I'm pleased to see that the advisory committee even moved the resolution like this. But I do share your concerns about a bit of the cost. So now here's a question, and I don't know what staff member I'm asking this to, but not every year for sure, but usually sometimes when there's excess in a budget. So like we allocated $10 million for City Hall repair and it came in at 8. And then we get that memo in June or May that puts it back into reserves. Could we move something that says exactly what this motion is, but it says the project be considered in 10-year capital budget for completion in 2024, subject to available funding in the, I don't know what you call it, the excess, essentially leftovers, where I understand not every year is a surplus year, but I've been around long enough to know that it's small amounts of money, but it's a decent amount of money. You can answer that. Oh, sorry, after. I don't know who I'm asking that to.
Sure. Yeah, Chair Morales, absolutely. Like every year there are projects where there are surpluses. However, those surpluses typically go back into the reserves. And if I could speak for the treasurer who's not here, he would say it's not truly a surplus because our reserves are in pretty rough shape.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, you're still kind of competing. Every project is still competing for scarce funds.
Perfect. And it's sorry to put you on the spot like this, but are you aware of any current programs that the city might have a good chance at applying for federal programs, grants about funds like this? I with a quick Google a couple of weeks ago, I noticed the town of Fergus got over $130,000 to pay for a fully accessible self-cleaning bathroom 2-3 years ago. Some of that might have been accessibility. Some of that I think might have been infrastructure, tourism, COVID money. But I'm just wondering if maybe that's an option for us that you know of. In theory, that's always an option, but I'm trying to make members of council feel more comfortable with the financial cost.
Chair Morales, I'm not aware of any, but that's not to say there couldn't be some in the future. So we would always keep an eye out for those. But I'm not aware of any right now.
Mayor Nutt?
Yeah, I'm gonna go full circle on this and full flip flop, which is that if there's no access from the sidewalk to the accessible park, like it shouldn't depend on whether there's money left over at the end of the year. That I actually believe it should just get done. If there is access from sidewalk to the park, then it needs to wait in queue. And until I have that answer, I can't really make a determination. Because the problem here is people who with accessibility issues being able to access the accessible park.
Designed for them. Mhm.
And Counselor, I'm just gonna, can I say what you just said? You know, we have Sunnydale Park. It is not the same standard of accessibility because this is the #1 park in Canada, quite frankly, for accessibility. But there are accessible features to that park and it was designed that way at Sunnydale. And it doesn't have a proper parking lot either. And I was actually going to say that earlier, but then I thought maybe the people of Ward 4 don't want a tarmac park there. Maybe they want the gravel one, but you know, there's going to be other examples around.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Deputy Mayor Thompson. Sorry, I'm leaning more to one side.
Through your chair, maybe to Mayor Nuttall as a friendly, maybe in your amendment, and I don't know if you meant by full circle that you were removing that, but that at minimum an accessible path be constructed, because the parking lot, full construction will be probably $750,000 right now. Wasn't it like 600 and
It was in the 400s with a 90,000 contingent.
sorry. So $500,000. But to your point that until, you know, monies are freed, that at least an accessible pathway be constructed from the sidewalk to the asphalt to give them accessibility. And then if it's not there, and then it can be put into the queue, or it can be sped up depending on, you know, because they are actually doing some groundwork studies on it right now. So just like to solve the problem of the concern of everybody, it being an accessible park, to maximize the accessibility for people. And then my other thought is if we could increase the accessible parking spots on the upper level, because it's probably at the standard right now, but I think we are able to change the number of accessible parking spots on the asphalt, which would then, you know, facilitate more parking for people with, you know, mobility vans and stuff, just as a quick kind of guaranteed fix to increase the accessibility. And then with all the other work, and it may come in at a lot cheaper depending on the groundwork that staff are already undertaking.
I was a big friendly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harris, you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Morales. Yeah, I hadn't thought I would comment, but I do agree this is not a Ward 9-10 neighborhood park. This is a community asset, and the facilities are designed such that people from all over the city are coming there. So certainly for folks of Ward 8, I'm sure they go there. And I really appreciate Mayor Nuttall's reference to Sunnydale, because that's a really interesting comparator and has been there in that shape for quite some time with that parking lot, which is less than accessible itself. My question really through you, Chair, is to Mr. Rene Sendran, and wondering, are there AODA standards for parks? And if so, are we in compliance as it currently sits?
Through you, Chair Morales, to Councillor Harris, there are AODA standards. And I do believe that we do meet them in this case. You know, keeping in mind that we do have full accessible parking spots, and the park is accessible. Yes, there is a small stretch of path that is not paved between the sidewalk and the parts within the park, but I do believe we meet the AODA standards.
Okay, thank you. And maybe that's in part of Mayor Nuttall's question about, is there a path that allows that accessible access as part of that, you know, being confident that we are meeting the standard? And I guess the same question would apply through you, Chair Morales. Is Sunnydale Park accessible, meeting AODA standards?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Does Sunnydale Park also meet AODA standards?
Through you, Chair Morales to Councillor Harris, I'd have to look into that, but I would assume that it does.
Okay, thank you. Just wonder if we're getting to priorities, as you mentioned, Sunnydale, if it doesn't meet standards and the other one does, then the priority might flip. I mean, for our accessibility community, that would become, I would think, the priority to make them meet standard. And so I thank you for the opportunity to ask the questions, and thank you, Mr. Arandy-Sundaram. I think we want to definitely meet standards. I really like the idea of, if this is a really active and a busy park for our community and accessibility is prioritized, then I don't know why we have to do the minimum amount of parking spots like that, Deputy Mayor Thompson, of adding more spots. Let's make sure there is adequate spots in that paved area for the accessibility. So thank you, Chair Morales.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I'm just going to jump in here for a second. A question to Bala. While the parking lot the totality of the parking lot, paved and unpaved, might meet AODA standards, does a sidewalk meet it? Because I remember when I did a site visit with Deputy Mayor Thompson, that sidewalk was really washed out. And again, I know you're not staff, but I'll go to you first quickly, and I guess I'll let staff have the final word on that. Deputy Mayor Thompson, could you just refresh my memory on what you saw with the sidewalk? Because I think you brought it to my attention.
Thanks, Chair Morales. Yeah, when we did do the site visit, there is a concern because the gravel parking lot and the sidewalk are at the exact same level. Because of the loose gravel, it does get on the sidewalk, which creates a lot of problems.
With mobility scooters and electronic equipment, yeah, which I understand, like the whole
even
city.
for children without accessibility problems with
Mhm.
rollerblades, and it's dangerous to have gravel over a sidewalk in general.
Yeah, so I think that's where I did the 180 from. I don't think I can justify this to seeing different perspectives, but sorry, Bala, I said I'd let you have the right last word on this one. I know your answer was to the asphalt parking lot, so it's not necessarily that you forgot the sidewalk, but could you speak to the sidewalk?
Chair Morales, I'd have to look into that to make sure that the sidewalk was in a condition that it met the AODA standards, but I can get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. And a quick question, gravel lots are not AODA compliant by the very nature of gravel lots. I'm not including asphalt lots in this. Is that a correct statement, that gravel lots are by their very nature not AODA compliant?
Again, Chair Morales, I'd have to look into that and confirm that. I don't want to give you an inaccurate response.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Now, based on the feedback, what I might recommend to committee, and I can't move amendments or things, but I like the motion that the committee did. And for other members of the city, I think it's very telling that the Seniors and Accessibility Advisory Committee did this motion. It doesn't have a political flavor. And that's not an implication that politics is bad by nature, but the very fact that it came from the committee when the own ward councilor was hesitant on this, and I communicated with nobody from this committee at all through the process. I think that is very telling. I want to reiterate, while it is legally, technically in Ward 9, it's very shared by Ward 8, 9, 10 a lot, and the Ward 10 population, specifically that school, really is the one that uses it a lot. So with the discussion that we had, would it be possible, and I think this is maybe a Ms. Cook question or a valid question, could we do an amendment that essentially says what the amendment says, but it says, that be directed to investigate the feasibility of designing and reconstructing the main parking lot to a fully accessible asphalt parking lot, comma, and also a pathway option. Essentially, what might be good for members of council is if a shopping list comes back. This is your Cadillac version. This is your nothing, well, 0. This is your just a pathway. This is your pathway and 20 spots, something like that. I don't want to create too much work, but maybe that could make members of council feel more comfortable.
Through you, Chair Morales, to the rest of the committee. Since you've asked for a lot of information this evening about the parking lot and the pathway, and staff are coming back with answers, may it be prudent that we maybe hold any amendments till general committee next week? And then that way, we can, then they can be more fulsome because you'll have the information to make a better decision on what amendments you put forward. And then maybe stopping, like not stopping, but helping not having to put further amendments forward next week.
Amazing. I agree, Ms. Cook.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's I think a very prudent approach. So I'm gonna actually withdraw my friendly amendment. Leave it to the main one that was on the agenda, and we can get all the information back and
Perfect.
go from there.
Awesome. Amendment has been withdrawn. The original motion, as earlier stated, and in your agendas, is on the floor. Any other member of committee or non-member of committee? Councillor Congo.
Yes, thank you. Just maybe a comment overall. While this is brought forward and the scope is around the parking lot and such, I think just as it moves to general committee, I mean, there's great conversation also about washrooms and AODA. And so I think a broader picture might be of benefit when we look at how we are communicating or advertising to the public accessible spaces that we've invested in and what truly is or isn't, and our appreciation of AODA. Because I would say we've talked about bathrooms that don't exist that are accessible. And I think the conversation has been led to they're too expensive from a capital plan and they've been deferred. But we have accessible porta potties. And I don't know if we keep that in mind and we have them in operation at our baseball parks and soccer parks. And so I don't want the scope of this conversation and future conversations as it tracks to general committee to be on parts of parks and not a holistic approach to accessibility as an example. So I think that's a benefit to make sure if we're going to then make improvements to make a park more accessible, it's making the whole park more accessible and we don't lose sight of the bigger system, because if you're inviting people to come, you probably want to make sure a washroom is a necessity.
Thank you, Councillor Congo. I don't think.
Just a comment, not a
No, I
question.
know, no. I agree with your sentiment. I just don't know if it's consistent with the motion that the advisory committee passed, because in the very, and I wasn't there, but the very name of it is design and reconstruction of the main parking lot in Painswick Park. So to have a comprehensive discussion where they already narrow the scope.
It's a comment, not a question, that while we move this forward, you've put something forward that's scoped to a specific area of a park. It might be prudent as this conversation continues at general committee or back to accessibility committee, that there's a broader scope in the future tied to a fully accessible system.
Okay, perfect. Ms. James Reed, I see that you're here. Very quick answer if needed. Could we rely on Access Berry as needed for the comments that Councillor Congo made? Comments, yeah.
Through you, Chair Morales, thank you for the question. Certainly, we can look to provide that information on our website, but we would rely on our partners within the other departments to provide us that information.
Okay, perfect. And Councillor Congo, just to confirm, I said your comments. So I asked a question to Ms. James Reed. You can play the tape back. Sorry, I saw a hand up here.
Yeah, thank you. Just it sounds like the pathway from Big Bay Point's been barricaded. There's been a whole bunch of construction in the area happening in the roadway. Can we find out if that barricade is permanent or temporary? And if temporary, when it's returned to normal, and if it's returned to normal, if it's accessible? Because there are grade issues there too, which might make it not accessible. Like even if it's pavement, it doesn't mean that it's gonna work.
For you, Chair Morales, to Mayor Nuttall. So I believe that project is complete now and the barricade has been removed if you're referring to the access off of Big Bay Point. And I do believe that path is paved. Yeah.
Okay, lots of questions and we'll get the answers. Thank you, Ms. Cook, for focusing on us. Any other non-members committee? No questions, no comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as printed, please indicate. Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. No reports of officers corporation. There is one item for discussion, and that item is 8.1 parking restriction on Sherwood Court. That staff in the Development Services Department investigate the feasibility of restricting parking on Sherwood Court and report back to General Committee, sponsored by Councillor Corser. As a member of committee wish to place the motion on the floor? Councillor Corser, do you want to place your motion? Okay, it is on the floor from Councillor Corser. Anyone have any questions, comments? Nope. Non-members of the committee, seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate. And that passes unanimously. And this concludes the Community Safety Committee meeting at 7:04 PM Eastern Standard Time.